everybody. Welcome to the show. Very excited to have with us today one of Vancouver's premier grapplers, judoka, and all-around nice guy. Sony Sahota has over 30 years of martial arts experience. He devoted the last 20 years to grappling, gi, and no-gi, and continues to study and train hard. Sony is a black belt in judo and works as a full-time instructor at Kensington Judo Club in Vancouver, BC. I think I've heard of that. He's also a wrestler, collegiate and freestyle, coached by national level wrestlers from Canada, the United States, and India. He creates digital products for leading online instructional platforms such as BJJ Fanatics and Judo Fanatics, which continue to be bestsellers. Now, if you've listened or watched this podcast before, you know that my guests are pretty diverse, pretty eclectic. I have everyone from comics to fighters and the odd political activists as well. I just like having interesting guests. And I can't think of anyone who has stood out to me more in the grappling community than this guy. So please give it up for a warm Wallace Hartley Presents welcome to Mr. Sony Sahota. Thanks for being here, buddy.
Hey, thanks. Glenn, thanks for having me. That's awesome. I'm really, it's a real pleasure to be on your show. Well,
I know you were busy today. You had no-gi, you had wrestling. I'm very impressed, before we get to any of the questions, with what's been going on at Kensington Judo Club, because it's really expanded and it has new location, but also the BJJ, the wrestling, all that stuff, women's self-defense. And that's a bit of a, I don't know if that's the norm nowadays, but it is a bit of a diversion, from traditional judo dojo. And I think most of that was down to you, I'm guessing.
I can't take all the credit. I have had major support in Kensington Judo from Andre Godel, who's the president, and
yes,
also the committee from Kensington Judo. So, I mean, I guess Andre's whole mission statement of Kensington Judo is judo for everybody. Okay, so it's judo for not just the competitors, not a select few. It's judo for everybody, men, women, children, everyone. Okay. Some people, are quite intimidated when they start judo. It is a high impact combat sport. But we do offer other programs that are such as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, no-gi Jiu-Jitsu, which is less impact, but it's more pressure-based. That kind of gets people's toes wet in grappling, and then some of them do transition into judo, or some of them do both. We cater to everyone, and we have these very unique programs to allow people to participate, not just in judo, but in grappling in general.
So I got to say, you really are a bit of an all-rounder, judo, wrestling, BJJ. So can you talk a little bit about your intro to martial arts and kind of your background, where you came at it from? And I think, I don't know, guys like me, my age, certain age, right? It's, it was all about Bruce Lee and I want to do that. So where did you come at it from?
People ask me this question and it's like, oh man, this is ancient history now. Okay, so I started martial arts back in 1990. This was before the UFC.
Yes.
So at that time, I was quite lucky to learn Jeet Kune Do or JKD concepts, which was probably the original quote unquote mixed martial arts of that time.
For sure.
It was very eclectic. So they've basically took the kicks from kung fu and karate. They added the handwork from boxing. We added some weapons from the Filipino martial arts. So everything was conceptually based, and it was encouraged to. We were encouraged to do cross training. So we did the best we could at that time, what was available to us. And so I already started with the mindset of having an open mind, have an eclectic view of martial arts from the beginning. So I was never tied down to one style. Mm-hmm. So that was when I started. And then eventually I moved towards Muay Thai kickboxing because I wanted to have more of a resistance-based training. So what I mean is, at the time, we did a lot of patterns, we did a lot of moves, drilling without a partner, a lot of solo drilling, but we needed something like that represented sparring in a sense. And I think Muay Thai was as close as you can get to striking, live resistance training. So
Yes.
especially for self-defense. Yeah. So
especially when you get hit.
Yeah, you got to learn to give hits and then take hits too, and it's a pretty hard lesson. But eventually, one way or another, you will learn, right? So then from Muay Thai, I got into Chinese kickboxing, which is it's called Sanda.
Yeah.
So what it is, it's like it's kickboxing, but you're allowed to do throws and takedowns. And I wasn't particularly very good at the throws and takedowns, so I tended to avoid those and then focus more on the striking.
Right. And that, Sanda is something we hear about now, but, it wasn't really, it wasn't a very popular thing. It seems to me like right now, and again, this is all goes back to UFC and mixed martial arts. It seems that the most popular are, judo or BJJ, Muay Thai, and whatever else you want to throw in there to add to your arsenal. Would that be fair to say these days?
Sort of. I mean, MMA has gone through many different phases over the decades, right? So originally, it was mostly grappling based. It seemed like the grapplers were winning in mixed martial arts, and it started with grappling with the Gracie family and what they've done with UFC 1, right? Which we'll probably talk about a little bit later.
Yeah.
And then the transition happened where then the wrestlers started coming in and they were trying to defend the takedowns, and they started ground and pounding, right? Trying to strike people in the guard. And now we're starting to see, in this current phase, we're starting to see a lot more strikers becoming champions. It's kind of come full circle now. People have kind of figured out, okay, we don't need to learn submissions. We don't even need to learn jiu-jitsu, maybe in some instances. As long as you know how to wrestle or stop a wrestler and play the distance game with the striking. That seems to be the current phase of MMA right now. So we've seen these different phases. Some people are kind of stuck in an era. Like a lot of jiu-jitsu people think they can go to MMA in modern times. I disagree. Maybe back in '93 you could have done it, but now the game is very different right now.
And why? Maybe just elaborate a little. Why is it not so easy anymore for a straight up BJJ guy to transition in MMA? I'm assuming you're talking about without having a striking game, without having other options.
Yeah, well, the name MMA implies that you need to know many different disciplines, particularly striking, wrestling, and some type of groundwork submission game, right? If you're going in if you're going in as a pure specialist and you're only one dimensional, I don't think you're going to have the level of success. You have to know. You can have a level of expertise in a discipline, but you have to round it out with some wrestling or groundwork. Or if you're a grappler, you have to have a level of striking to bring out your best qualities. So it's today, the reason why jiu-jitsu today is not doing well. Actually, jiu-jitsu is going through a huge crisis right now, several crises. Okay,
really?
Number one, we don't see any jiu-jitsu champions being MMA champions anymore. It just doesn't exist.
Yes.
You don't see pure 100% jiu-jitsu coaches coaching MMA. It doesn't exist, right? It's not the case anymore. And also jiu-jitsu, when I say jiu-jitsu, I'm saying Brazilian jiu-jitsu as well.
Yeah.
The third crisis is self-defense, right? We can't say that jiu-jitsu is a viable form of self-defense. Now, I'm probably going to get a lot of hate on this.
Jiu-jitsu, you are.
Yeah, jiu-jitsu markets itself on self-defense, but
it does.
We really don't see a lot of jiu-jitsu. Self-defense is a very broad term, right? which is another discussion, So, so I think the three crises that jiu-jitsu is undergoing right now is that you don't see BJJ people as champions in MMA. You don't see it. You don't see coaches, BJJ coaches coaching in MMA. It's not a viable form of self-defense.
I think the only people who really stuck to self-defense were like Henner and Hiron, who run the Gracie University.
And I have to say, like, I have some criticisms of them, but I do train with a Henner Gracie black belt, and
Really?
it really does open my eyes. They do have a system to, like, their entire grappling system.
Undeniably.
It's based on how to deal with strikes, how to nullify the strikes, and how to get a positional advantage. So either you can work your submission game or even land strikes of your own. So, I mean, it's really opened up my eyes, like what the Gracie system is for self-defense and maybe even MMA. They've taken all those into account, whereas the majority of jiu-jitsu these days is sport jiu-jitsu based on a rule set, right?
Yeah.
So that's probably answers one of your questions, is that you don't see a lot of jiu-jitsu champions in MMAs because the rule sets that they practice under doesn't lend itself towards strikes.
For sure. And let's go back for a second to UFC. Anybody of a certain age, we all remember where we were when UFC 1 happened, and we watched Royce Gracie dominate his opponents with this thing that none of us had ever seen before. I mean, we had. If you'd done judo, you knew, but you didn't, because it was just like, what is a triangle choke? What, you know what I mean? And so, now I think every single UFC fighter has a ground game. Whether they want to or not, they just need to. You mentioned that before. I guess my question would be, do you think with everything, with mixed martial arts, with UFC, with one championship, with all that stuff, has this harmed or helped traditional judo?
Okay, has it helped or harmed traditional judo? Okay, I think it's
popularity-wise.
Popularity-wise, okay. I think it's a double-edged sword. Okay. Number one, let's start with the negatives. People don't know that, like, the jiu-jitsu that you see in MMA is actually judo groundwork, and that's a hard thing to accept, right?
Especially if you're a BJJ guy.
Yeah. Their origins of BJJ do trace to judo and judo groundwork. Now, they may look different, but is principally the same. Okay. The thing with MMA and judo, like, judo has a code of ethics, right? It's got a code of conduct, right? We don't do prize fighting. Okay, it's whether it's an implicit or explicit. There's this culture in judo that we don't do those kind of things, right? We're here. Judo has always been a tool for education. It's never been a tool for fighting, right? So there's that cultural constraint, if you want to call it that. If you're seeing, like, whether they're jiu-jitsu people or judo people entering MMA, judo people tend to distance themselves from MMA, right? And it's also judo. A lot of the athletes around the world, they're paid to train. They're paid to travel and compete at the highest level. And they don't need to go to MMA to prove anything. They're well treated in their by their governing bodies in their nation. So there's no incentive for them to go into MMA.
I was just gonna jump in there to say that I do know quite a few people who. Just for the audience, for the benefit of those who don't know. Judo, traditional Japanese martial art, based on Japanese jiu-jitsu, founded by Kano Jigoro Sensei at 1888, and Kodokan Judo is a standard, and it's accepted worldwide as this is the way we do things. But I know a lot of people who were like, dude, I can't afford BJJ, but I can afford judo. Because after the Second World War, when the American occupation happened in Japan, they took all, judo, especially judo and kendo, and went, you guys aren't doing this ever again. Because it was just like contributed too much to that nationalistic, militaristic cause. And with good reason, because there was a lot of that going on leading up to the Second World War. So it took everybody. It took everybody in judo. It took everybody in kendo a long time, like into the 50s, 1950s, before they could establish their practice again in a way that was more do, less jutsu, and less threatening to the occupying forces. But also, it was just standard that all instructors were volunteer, and it was all kind of community-based and as cheap as possible kind of thing. And that attitude came over here to North America and has stayed, right? Like, how many people have learned judo at the YMCA? How many people have you learned judo at your community center, right? So I know a lot of people who have just discovered, they're like, I can do the same thing and more with judo for cheaper. Would you say that's accurate?
That's true. I mean, one of the values of judo is judo for everyone, right? That's also our ethos at Kensington Judo. So it's always been like Sensei Kano always wanted judo to be accessible, right? So the profit motive wasn't part of the deal, right? So we try to make it as cheap as possible, so everyone has a chance to train judo as a tool to self-betterment, and in turn self-betterment of society as a whole, right? Mm-hmm. That was the whole philosophy.
Yes. If I got it right here too. I have to plug this book. It's not like you just wrote it. But if you are new to judo, and if you're a book guy like me, if you like reading, not pictures, not videos, but if you want to get a good idea of the foundation of the art, this right here, Mind Over Muscle. And this is strictly, writings from the founder of judo, and it's philosophical. It talks about all that stuff. It talks about ethics. It talks about morality. It talks about physical education, spiritual, mental, the whole thing. And it just kind of sums up his philosophy. And it is a brilliant read. And so if you get a chance, I mean, you can find it most places. I think it's published by Kodansha.
Going back, when Sensei Kano was developing judo, it wasn't called judo at that time. It was jujitsu. And in fact, jujitsu was going extinct because of the Meiji Restoration. People didn't need to learn martial arts because everyone could get guns. You don't need to fight anybody anymore. Samurais were out of date. They're obsolete because now we have firearms and we have weapons and such. So a lot of the jujitsu techniques were preserved by masseuses, people who are bone setters. These people could set your bones in place.
Yeah.
Right? So Jigoro Kano, because he was a product of the Meiji Restoration and the modernization of Japan, he was being bullied in school, right? He had a Western education. And to deal with the bullies, people told, some of his relatives told him about an art called jujitsu, in which you can subdue people with minimal effort. Well, he was intrigued by the idea, and he had to visit the market where these bone setters lived, and he had to learn from the bone setters how to do jujitsu techniques. So if it wasn't for Jigoro Kano, we wouldn't have jujitsu as we know it today. He incorporated all the moves that were effective in jujitsu, put them into live training of what we call randori, eliminated the lethal moves like neck cranks and heel hooks and all that stuff. You don't want to injure your opponent, but really emphasize the simple nature and the the most common holds that you have in grappling. And because at that time jiu-jitsu had a very bad reputation. Like criminals were doing it to rob people, that was bad. So
Right.
Kano Sensei wanted to distance himself from that jiu-jitsu, so he created a code of ethics and a philosophy, and called it judo instead of jiu-jitsu, which means like techniques, the way of the soft techniques. Judo is like the softer yielding way. It is an approach not only to this martial art, but it's an approach to life, right? And that's why he made the differentiation between jiu-jitsu and judo. But ultimately, they're the same. But it's just judo has a more of a code of conduct and in philosophy.
Yeah, very much so. And just something I want to dive into for a second. Just there's always one thing that gets a burr up my butt, and in this instance, it is there's no surprise here. Social media, and if you watch YouTube, if you watch Instagram, depending on what your feed is, what you follow and stuff like that, but it makes me crazy these days with these guys out there on YouTube, these so-called martial arts influencers, who are constantly comparing, what's the best martial art, calling people out, saying this is ineffective, this is crap. I know, and I'm sure you know as well, it's about the individual. It's about your own capabilities. It's not about any one system. But it just seems to be this big competition, for clicks, and they will just denigrate other people for the sake of numbers. And you know what I mean?
Right.
What's your take on that?
People have knowledge about stuff, but they don't have knowledge of. So which one are you going to take, right? You can know a lot about something, but you may not know anything of something. So a lot of these people who make these comments and they make this clickbaity content, they've never served in the military. They can't even define what self-defense is. What's define self-defense? It's such a broad term.
Yes.
Like what are we specifically talking about when you say or the streets? Well, define streets. Like my street, like my back alley. Like define street.
Oh, I know.
So like a lot of this stuff, like what they're talking about, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't even know what they're getting involved in. And then they don't even address that even if they do engage in street fighting, quote unquote, or anything that's lethal, like a life or death situation, they don't even address PTSD that you're going to get after that. So like,
they don't address any of the consequences.
Yeah, so they don't know what they're talking about. And what's this obsession? What's this obsession about?
Yeah, that's my point.
Like, why are you thinking about this kind of stuff when you live in one of the most safest countries in the world? Like I don't understand these debates. So this is why I say just sorry, Glenn, but I don't. This is why I say I don't teach self-defense. I don't teach military stuff. I don't teach you MMA. I just teach a sport and an art and try to teach a way of judo that enriches your life instead of like comparing and trying to like kick someone's ass, right?
Yes, and my I try my best not to go down those rabbit holes, but every once in a while I'll see one and I'm just like, oh, would you shut the hell up? I worked for many years in Vancouver's downtown east side, in mental health and addiction, and I spent a lot of time in the front lines and on the street down there. And let me tell you something. I saw a ton of fights, and none of these guys had any training or formal training. They had a lot of experience, and those fights, when they happened, they were so fast. And what you really had, and this is what people fail to realize when they go beacon off about self-defense and what's the most effective. What they fail to realize is that the guys who win these fights are, they are a bit psychotic. I mean, they have a gunslinger mentality. They are not afraid to take that first shot, to punch you in the throat, to kick you in the nuts, to do whatever. They can do it. And I don't care who you are. If you're your average guy, you're not prepared for that. There's no way in the world. You're going down. See you later.
These are surprisal states, right?
Yes.
If you ever encounter violence, it's not something you'll see coming. Look at prison fights.
No. Yeah.
Look at prison fights. Like, who like, if you square up to somebody, that's basically arrogance. That's an ego fight.
Yeah.
Right? What happens in prison? You get shanked and you don't know who did it. Even the guards don't even know. You can look at, some guy keels over, like, how do you defend against that? We have to accept as human beings, we have limitations. There is no martial art that could prepare you or help you defend against surprisal states like violence.
Yeah. And the thing, number one thing for me, self-defense wise, is, and again, this is like based on life experience, but when you're down in a neighborhood like the downtown east side, as long as you're not a dick, as long as you are, keeping yourself to yourself, and you look confident, and you don't look like a victim, and you say hello to people, if they eyeball you, you're going to be fine. And that was my experience, right?
Even if you go to another country,
It's the same, right?
You just respect the customs. Don't assert yourself and try to make yourself that you're the exception, like that Western or American exceptionalism that you go and you start being a dick in other countries, and then you complain that these people are like, oh, I got attacked. Well, what do you expect? You don't know the customs.
What were you doing?
Exactly.
Yeah, and to me, it's always just like self-awareness. Have a brain, if you, and don't, you said it before, don't have an ego. So if you see something that looks, or definitely if it feels sketchy, turn around or walk the other direction. Do whatever it is.
The problem is you can't sell martial arts that way.
You
can't sell it, right? So you have to instill this idea that you're under threat. Anything could happen. Don't take anything for granted. Carry a folder with you. Then you're in this heightened state of like that you're ready, and then they add the military to this. It's like we're not in a war zone. We're not in an occupied territory here, right? Like
I know, but it appeals to a certain crowd, whatever you want to refer to them as, the gym bros, the real hardcore kind of muscle heads, toxic masculinity, whatever you want to call it. I don't like throwing around terms like that, but you know what I mean? It's that whole macho kind of bullshit.
It appeals to people who feel that they need to improve themselves, that there's something wrong with you, and then there's someone out there that can fix it for you. Whether it's like we have a whole culture around it called self-improvement, that there's something wrong with you, and there's a product or a service that can help you improve yourself, self-betterment. But if you look at like Eastern traditions like judo, there's nothing wrong with you to be fixed. You just have to simply discover aspects of yourself. It's that sense of self-discovery that helps you change yourself and in turn change society.
Yeah,
right?
Very much.
It's not about like, oh, I got to fix something. Or you might not have anything wrong with you, but you still feel that you have to have some authority figure to tell you what to do and fix yourself. The problem was never apparent at all.
Oh yeah, and on that note, I would like to talk just for a minute about grappling in general for OGs like myself, and judo specifically, as therapy for all kinds of things. And you could substitute whatever martial art, but in this case, judo for sure. Anxiety, self-confidence, physical fitness, and even in my case, even though it's been many, many years. But recovery from substance abuse. I have always, in my work in mental health and addiction, encouraged, the people I work with or work for, helping, I'll always mention judo. Like, get yourself down to a club. It's going to do wonders for your self-confidence, for your physical fitness, and just make you feel better all around and get those endorphins rolling.
And even a sense of community. Even just
very much a sense of community.
Being around people. Right?
Yes, being around people who want to throw you through the air and slam you onto the mat as hard as they possibly can.
We live in a very isolating society. This is just another attempt to help you go and talk to people and get to know them, right?
But how do you feel, and especially, again, for older people like myself, because, my story. I mean, I did it when I was a teenager, when I was a kid, and when I was a teenager, and then nothing, and then came back to it when I was like, 59 or 60, something like that. And then I separated my shoulder. And you would think that would be enough, right? You would think, he's not coming back.
Came back to the mats, yeah.
But how do you feel about judo for older people?
Okay, now your goals are going to be different. Okay, like
yes,
every stage of your life, judo takes a different metamorphosis, right? So when you're younger, obviously you want to be a little more competitive. You want a workout. You want to do a lot of like techniques, maybe and compete at a certain level. Once you're done competing, once you're done doing all that hard training, now it becomes like, well, it could take many forms, but maybe just learning about judo now. Now you can start learning about, hey, what's with the ethics? What's with the philosophy? What's with the technical aspects of the sport, right? How do these techniques actually work? How do I set up things, right? And you start looking at it from an I can't even say the word. I'm going to stop.
Epistemological.
Yes. Thank you. That's a mouthful.
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then as you get older, now it's like, okay, what am I capable of doing that requires less energy and just go into simplicity? Like right now, I'm 45 years old. I can't move like I used to, but because I have some epistemic values in judo. I have some parts of judo that are very significant to me on a technical level. I'm able to pull them off when I see the opportunity to do so. I don't try to learn new techniques. I don't try to learn the latest, athletic move. I just want to do the stuff, whatever invitations present themselves, I just enact on it. And even if it takes a whole 5 minutes to do so, I'll consider it a win if I can just ride out the whole 5 minutes and get nothing. So that's a win for me.
Yes.
But if I can if I can pull off one move, that's a win, right?
Oh, and I've seen you do it.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And when in that moment, it's amazing to watch.
Yeah.
Because and I think anybody, including myself, when I'm sure you've seen the expression on my face sometimes when stuff works. I'm like, what the hell was that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't know how. It's good kazushi or it's timing or
See, this is the thing. People think they know. They want to learn. Like they ask me this all the time. How do you do this? How do you show me a move? Show me what you're doing.
Yes.
A lot of things in judo are actually quite incidental. They're by accident. I'm not trying to do a specific move on you. I see an opening for something and I will enact on it. And I don't care what that is. And it's going to take form in some way. So people talk about it like it's so mysterious. There is a science to back it up. I could give you some scientific terms on it. It involves a different paradigm of cognition. But in essence, I to your rational brain, I can't explain what I'm doing. Like what I say is and you hear me say this in class when you participate in my judo classes. I say judo is a non-linear system. It is not linear. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like bang on. And this is something that I was really uh, enamored with when I first saw you teach. To me, it's new, and it may not be new to other folks, but to me, it's certainly new. If you've experienced traditional judo, traditional Kodokan judo, whether you're a kid, whether you're a teenager, whatever, um, but what you managed to do is you don't teach specific techniques. You just you concentrate on concepts, essentially, and you explain concepts to people and how you can apply those concepts to different situations. So, where did you come up with that style of teaching, that philosophy?
I didn't come up with it. There is a new science of motor learning called ecological dynamics. Um, it's just a theory of motor learning. Basically, instead of teaching people explicit instructions on how to do something, you allow the athlete to explore and make mistakes. They need to have an experience of what grappling is like. Okay. Once they understand their environment, they will see invitations for something to occur. And again, I didn't come up with this. I read a lot about the science, so it's called ecological dynamics. There's also competing theories called active inference and activism, which is very similar, but they have different ideas on how we perceive our environments and how we enact in them. Right? These are very complex and multidisciplinary topics. So, I mean, that's probably for another podcast. But
Yes.
in essence, what I'm trying to do in my classes is instead of getting the coach to be the center of attention and getting everyone to listen to me and overcorrecting students, I get the students to be the center of attention, and I get them engaged in their environment. So, for example, if we're learning judo, typically in a traditional class, I would show you a technique and you would rep out the technique a few times, and then we'll do some live training, and somehow you're going to try to do that technique in the live training. But the reality is it's not going to work because you have no context on how to use that technique in a live situation. You're just, it's just taking you longer to figure out how that happens. What I'm doing is I'm not teaching you any techniques up front. You need to know what it's like to be in that environment, how to grip somebody. Okay? So once you understand, like, through personal experience, and I can't give you a system, I can give you a few concepts. I can kind of guide your behavior in a sense, but once you understand what it's like to be gripped and how to grip someone back, now you start to see openings, and now you start to see, like, hey, there's something going on here. I feel that there's an opportunity, and this is where I try to bring a personal experience to grappling rather than just like basing it on a system or a model or a pattern, right? So once you know what it's like to fail and what it's like to succeed, then I will maybe introduce a technique afterwards, because now you have a context on how to apply it, right?
Very much.
Of course, this takes a long time, but once you discover something about yourself and you discover what's happening in your environment, it's yours forever. So you can't unlearn that at that point, right? So there's nothing to remember. You don't need to remember the details of anything. It's just that when you see an opportunity for action, and you just take it, right? And over time, when those probability states keep occurring, now you can start to refine it and make it aesthetic, and that can, because it's personally yours, right? Another issue is that if I try to teach a technique and I make everybody do the same technique, everyone has different sizes, they have different personalities, they have different dispositions, they have different weight classes. Some people are injured. No one's going to get that one technique. So why am I stopping the whole class and getting them to do that one technique when they're going to end up doing whatever they want anyway in the live training? It's a waste, right? So I'd rather them just be engaged with what they're doing, grip fighting, cutting angles, trying to get their preferred grips, and see what happens from there, right?
Yeah, very much. Something also I forgot about this, but I want to bring it up now before I forget. So actually this in August, myself and my wife and girls will be going back to Japan. Well, those guys are leaving first. I'm going to join them later. And I'm going to try my best to convince my wife to let me go to the Kodokan. It's pretty much, there's like different packages. There's all kinds of things you can do. But even if you just want to go for a class for a day, they're very welcoming. But that's not what I want to talk about, my little adventure. What I want to talk about is how they are, from what I've been reading and some people I've been talking to, trying to get back to traditional values at the Kodokan. And because, as I'm sure you've seen, and it kind of annoys me, that we've developed kind of an American football sort of attitude towards competition, so that when you see somebody get in a ippon, and they're just like, yeah, doing this kind of stuff. There's a lot of places in Japan you could never do that. They'd kick you out.
Yeah.
And so they are trying to develop that again because it has gotten so far away. Because even in the beginning, with Kano Sensei, he was so leery, as you mentioned before, of competition and that sort of attitude. So how do you think that we could have the best of both? Getting back to that kind of respect and tradition, and at the same time have healthy competition.
Okay.
There's a bunch of questions in there, I know.
So Glenn, let's just say you foot trip me. You trip me with your foot, okay? And I fall down, and you win the match. Did you do the technique? Did you do that on me?
No. Yes.
Okay, is that what you want me to hear? Okay, here's the thing. Okay, knowing what I know about like ecological dynamics and stuff, if I throw somebody, let's just say like a big throw, they go over my shoulder and they land on their back, and I start cheering, oh wow, that's my favorite technique, I did it. Most people would think that I'm the doer. I'm the one that did that.
Yes.
But in reality, it goes both ways. My opponent made a mistake. There was a point there where I could enact a move, right? But whether I initiated that or not, we don't know. Right? That could be completely incidental. Some techniques in judo happen so fast that you attempt a technique and it's completely accidental.
Yes.
Would you say that you threw that guy, or was it like you had no intention to throw that person, but you got it? Right. So my question is, like, we have this sense of self, right? That we think that we threw somebody, but in reality, it's just an emergent property that happened in the match. And we don't, and consciousness or whatever you think you are may or may not have done it, right? Now, this is going deep into phenomenology, like, this might be metaphysical, but it's not. Like, you just acted or you didn't act in a moment in time, and deep down inside that was an accident. You had no intention to do that throw, but you'll take it, So I don't see any reason why you should be cheering, because it's, sometimes you can win by a sliver, right? I mean, I can understand the relief that you get from a high stakes match. I can understand that. But to say that you've done that technique and I did that to that person, it's not completely true, right?
Yeah, and I do, like, this is just me personally, but we practice traditions, and they're traditions for a reason, to carry on, not to keep things the same or status quo, but there are certain rituals, for lack of a better term, certain traditions that we practice because we want to preserve that, and I see nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
There is there's etiquette in every dojo, and you always need to follow that. That's just me. That's something that I feel that makes me feel safe.
Yeah.
I don't mean physically. I just mean that's how I connect.
Yeah. You see, traditions are not always written in stone. Okay. For example, Japanese judo, as it's practiced in Japan currently, does not resemble the Japanese judo that we practice here in North America. Okay. For example, yes, being good hygiene and cleanliness is a big deal in Japan, right? Traditionally, you're not supposed to wear a t-shirt or a rash guard underneath your gi. But in Japan, they've openly embraced it. Having a plain rash guard underneath your judo gi is almost a must in Japan. But there's still judo dojos here that if they see a rash guard on you, they force you to take it off.
I know.
Now, is that okay, now what's tradition here? Okay. Is it traditional in the sense that as a man, as what they do in Japan, you're supposed to take off, or traditionally you're supposed to take off your rash guard? But Japan, in current, modern day Japan, they still have the same values, but in fact, they embrace the rash guard because it's more hygienic. So there's not a big deal, right? But we're so set in I don't know, maybe Orientalism. I don't know.
Well, it is, and that is, you hit the nail on the head there. That's what it is. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about tradition-wise is, I think just the mutual respect,
right?
The bowing, the good sportsmanship, the comradeship, those traditional values.
Yeah, I mean, we're a very chill gym. We're very open.
Extremely.
But but we're not. Don't mistake our gym as being lackadaisical. We do encourage people to bow and just give the respect to your and a lot of that comes organically. We have different cultures. We have probably the most diverse judo gym in probably BC. We have people from all over the world. Some of them are not accustomed to bowing, but they find their own ways of showing respect, right?
Oh, you bet.
And we encourage that, right? But I mean, universally, people do bow, but some people express respect. That's kind of a weird sentence. In their own way, right? So, and we encourage that as well, right? We don't tolerate bad attitudes. If we ever encounter that, we have a little personal discussion. Hey man, let's just set the, we have a discussion around that, right? And just let them clarify and give them a chance to correct their behavior. But that's very, very rare.
No, everybody there is, including yourself, including Andre Sensei. Everybody are very welcoming, very chill. But also, very, for lack of a better term, professional. Mm-hmm. I got to get this in here too because I almost forgot. But something that's hugely popular, and this is a big part of your background because you were a collegiate wrestler, and you also have some traditional Indian wrestling experience. But wrestling is now almost every MMA gym. How did that happen? Because I wrestled for a little bit in high school. It's not like, they picked me out and went, this guy. It was just like my social studies teacher went, you're kind of doing nothing. So come join the wrestling club. Not the team. It was like an after-school club, but we became a team. And I loved it. I wish I'd continued, but I didn't. So tell me about the popularity, other than the obvious of what you're adding to your arsenal as a martial artist, but now the popularity of wrestling everywhere you go within the MMA community.
I'll be honest, I never liked wrestling growing up. because
Okay.
yeah, I never liked it. The reason why, because wrestling before the UFC, before 1993, wrestling was
Yes.
not considered a martial art.
No.
Okay, it was just a sport where, and it just seems like it's like the struggle. It's just a struggle between really strong people, right? It's survival of the fittest, right? Whereas the term martial arts suggests that a weaker person can defeat a stronger opponent, right? So
Yes.
having that idea, you know, I didn't understand it correctly at that time before the. I was still like, I'm not even in high school at that time. Okay. Now we're starting to see that wrestling is an essential tool in MMA. Most of the champions, even right now, most of the champions have a wrestling background. It's undeniable.
Right.
Okay. Now you're starting to see in jiu-jitsu with the popularity of these different rule sets, particularly the ADCC rule set where you have to start standing up. Wrestling is coming back in. And you have to, and it's a very viable way to score points and get ahead of the scorecards so you can actually eke out a win. So wrestling, it should be in your toolbox. Even if you're not a proficient wrestler, you should learn something about basic hand fighting, basic positioning, and basic techniques. All right. And then build your game around that. Likewise with judo, if you're doing a gi tournament in Brazilian jiu-jitsu and you start the fight standing up, if you're proficient in judo, that's an easy 2 points for you.
Right.
And you know how long and boring jiu-jitsu can be in the gi. The guy's just going to be in
God.
half guard for like 5 minutes. All you have to do is just be in his half guard. You're ahead 2 points. You're going to win, or get him to stand up again.
I know.
You're going to win.
The first time I saw like an official actually move two guys who were like locked together, I was like, "What the hell is this?"
Yeah, yeah. But jiu-jitsu still has it hasn't matured like the other grappling sports, right? Other grappling sports, they have stall calls, they got yellow cards, they encourage action. They're also spectator sports, right? We want this sport to be spectator friendly. We want people to know what's going on. Whereas in jiu-jitsu, one person on top, one bottom, you don't know who's winning or losing. How did the bottom guy win? They just extended their arm and something happened and he won the match. Like how does that make sense, right?
Yes.
So there's a little bit of education that needs to be involved, and it's also you can argue that there needs to be a few rule changes for jiu-jitsu to be exciting. Like why is it that the when one guy sits down to seated position and the top person has to engage? Why can't it be the opposite? Why can't the bottom person stand up? Because most of grappling exchanges, even in real life, start standing up. So why are you preferring the person who's seated on their butt scooting towards you? It should be if I wanted to, like if this was any other situation, I'd curb stomp your head, like it's, so why not just like change the rule, just one little rule, just make the bottom player stand up. Now you're forced to engage, and that's more realistic, right?
So I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
If you had a piece of advice for someone who was just considering, training the martial arts, and any martial art, they're just thinking about it. They're thinking about it for a number of reasons, for physical fitness, or because they, want to get out and meet people. What kind of advice? What piece of advice would you give them to help them along their journey?
A little too general, but I would, and they don't know anything about martial arts. They just know they want
just what they've seen
somewhere. Okay,
right?
So this is what I'd probably do. Okay, I would be like, I'm going to give you 3 choices. Okay, we're going to start with a striking martial art, a grappling martial art, and a traditional martial art. Okay, you're going to do the free trials, and you're going to tell me which one was the most significant to you. Okay, so maybe you might do a free trial at a traditional karate gym, right? If you like the order, you like the structure, you like how It's safe. You feel that you have a good workout. That's awesome. Great. Maybe the next week you'll start a Muay Thai gym, right? Maybe you like hitting pads. Maybe you like, kind of moving around in a spontaneous manner, right? Maybe you like the crew over there, right?
Sure.
And then you can start with the grappling, right? Maybe you can try judo or jiu-jitsu for a week, all right? See what that's like. And then you come back and you tell me, like, okay, which one did you feel you had the most fun? And that's what I'll probably tell people. Try there's a reason why we have free trials, right? And not just one free trial, just for a week, right?
And again, you nailed it there. Whatever you have the most fun with.
Yeah, because why would you train otherwise, right?
Well, yeah. Why would you submit yourself? Unless, like me, you've had maybe one too many hits.
I had a phase where I was a competitor, and that was my whole identity. Like, it's not about fun; it's about winning. And yes. I burnt myself out mentally. I burnt my body out physically. I would take if someone scored on me, I'd take that so personal. I'd go home and I'd be like, "Oh man, I couldn't believe that guy scored on me," right? And then
you know what's funny too is, like, just for me, from my own point of view, when you get to a certain age, you just it's not that you don't care, but you have very little to prove except to yourself.
Yeah.
And so it's much easier. You can let your ego go a little bit. And let's face it, listen, this is my philosophy. Tell me what you think of this, right? If you and I are doing randori and I lose, and you're like 25 or 30, and, I'm almost 63, but really, you beat up an old man. But
yeah,
if I win, hello, that's my philosophy. And of course, it could only happen by accident, as we have discussed.
Yeah.
Sony, I cannot thank you enough for being a guest on the program.
Oh, we're done. I want to talk more, but that's okay.
Listen, you can come back anytime you want.
Just let me know, and I'll be happy to help. Yeah.
I would love to. I want to plug right now Kensington Judo Club here in Vancouver, British Columbia. What's the address?
187 East 11th Avenue. That's 11th and Main in Vancouver.
And everybody can find it online.
Yeah, KensingtonJudo.com.
Yep. I urge you, if that's what you're interested in, check it out. It's an awesome club, an awesome community of people, with the occasional awesome instructor. So once again, man, thank you for joining us. And thank you for tuning in and listening to our program today. If you're watching Wallace Hartley Presents on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, you can also listen on a bunch of other platforms. You just have to Google it, and they'll tell you where it's at. I know I should be plugging my show better than that, but you'll find it. It's the only program called Wallace Hartley Presents. And I know you're looking at me right now going, what the hell is that? But he was actually the band leader on the Titanic. And
okay.
When this show came about, I thought, we're either going to sink or go down with the ship. So that's where that came from. Anyways, thanks for joining us. I hope you can join us again, I believe, next week. My guest will be Rory Ferguson Ford, who is a brilliant stand-up comic who's in my guest today was Sony Sahota, judo black belt, grappler, all-around good guy, and sometimes he can tell the hell to go. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Take care and be good to yourselves.